Good Sunday morning, folks. I'm Evan Donovan. News Channel 8 is your local election headquarters, and this is Politics on Your Side. A huge and historic week in Florida politics, and an even bigger showdown set for the 2 months ahead. Here to break it all down with me are Adam Smith, political editor of the Tampa Bay Times, and Peter Schorsch of FloridaPolitics.com. Did I get that right, Peter?
You did. Good morning.
There we go. Good morning to you both. Well, folks, this week in the Florida primaries, as you know, Andrew Gillum shocked the state and really the nation with a historic win in the race for governor, becoming the first African-American to win the nomination for Florida governor. The man who raised and spent less money than all of his opponents and who was never higher than third in any pre-primary public polling won the race by nearly 3 percentage points.
We together with all of you over the next several months are going to make our way all across the state of Florida to red counties, to blue counties, to purple counties, and we're going to unite this state in ways that are unparalleled in the history of the state of Florida.
Gentlemen, put the Gillum win in historical perspective, or any perspective, really, if you can.
Massive. I mean, you said it. It was a historic election. He's now maybe the biggest national Democratic star on the horizon. Everybody's going to be watching this race.
Yeah.
If you had followed the polls, you'd written him off.
Yeah.
And if you actually listened to people on the ground, Democrats that were paying attention, mostly what you heard was Gillum, Gillum, Gillum.
Yeah. Interesting. It just goes to show, I mean, are we too dependent on polling? Is that because we're making these mistakes over and over again?
I think clearly you look at the Trump election and you look at this election, and the polls, a lot of the pollsters are getting it wrong. They're not polling the people that are actually coming out to vote in many cases.
I think you have to look at Andrew Gillum's win and the totality of the off year. We have seen progressive candidates and underfunded candidates win a series of special elections. The St. Petersburg mayoral race, a state senate race down in South Florida. And so it really doesn't matter who is the best funded candidate, it's who has the best message going into the election.
And, you know, to your point, you bring up the primary. It's the most energized people from each party who are coming out to vote. Is it really that much of a surprise that we got the most progressive candidate as of that race?
Well, it's been uncanny in Florida Democratic primary elections. It's been taken as a gospel that you've got to nominate somebody who's centrist, pro-business, usually from Tampa, Jim Davis, Alex Zink, Bill McBride, and they keep losing.
Right.
And so this is a big deal. This is the first time maybe ever that they've gone with somebody who really is an activist guy. Now keep in mind, he won with about 1/3 of the vote, so it's not like he did something huge.
Peter, Andrew said on the campaign trail over and over again, I don't think running Republican light is the way to win.
No, and I think that that's going to be his issue going into the general election. His platform is way to the left. I mean, he talks about abolish ICE. He talks about Medicare for all. You know, he couldn't answer that he was a capitalist when he was asked that question. And so Adam's right. This isn't just left. This is the far left of the Democratic wing. I think that's going to be an issue for him going into the general.
Certainly a challenge. How big is the FBI investigation?
I think it's big. There is an ongoing FBI investigation over involving alleged corruption at City Hall. There's been no evidence whatsoever that Gillum has been implicated, but nor is there anything that's completely cleared him.
Right.
There are photos of him with an undercover FBI agent. So whether it's fair or not, the Republicans are going to bludgeon him with that.
That's true.
And his main person, his main campaign treasurer, a guy named Adam Corey, is highly implicated in it, one way or the other. And so when that shoe does fall, I mean, there are going to be a lot of pictures of Adam Corey and Andrew Gillum next to each other.
Yeah. Guilt by association has a lot of times that we see that often. Of course, the woman everyone expected to win the Democratic nomination didn't.
Now we must all put all of our efforts behind Andrew Gillum and make sure that we do everything we can to have him elected governor on November 6, 2018. To make sure we do everything we can.
How shocked was the Graham campaign to lose?
I think they were shocked. I think they were very shocked. They were very confident going in. A lot of the last-minute polls suggested she was feeling pretty comfortable. Everybody knew there was a bit of a surge coming in for Andrew Gillum, but because you start voting a month early, the thinking was, but for most people, that it was going to be too little too late.
Peter, late afternoon, maybe even evening on Tuesday, she called a press conference for the following day with Patrick Murphy.
She was getting endorsements from Lois Frankel and people on Election Day. I think she thought she was up by 5 or 6 points. We showed her only about 2 or 3 points ahead of Gilliam going into the last day. But if you look at that speech right there, she's lackluster in that. She's underwhelming. And I think Adam and I will agree on this. She ran a lackluster campaign. There's no real signature moment for her throughout the entire time she was on the trail.
A lot of voters told me they just looked at her as being very vanilla. And I guess that's what showed out in the polls. On the Republican side, Representative Ron DeSantis won the nomination, buoyed by the strength of President Trump's endorsement. He beat out Polk County native Adam Putnam by 20 points in a landslide victory. Now, the man who had driven his whole political life toward the governor's mansion has to find a way to start over. I don't think anyone is shocked that DeSantis won, but I'm pretty shocked at how quickly it all happened and how big that margin was. The AP called that race at 8:01 p.m.
You know, it was really, it's gotten a little bit overshadowed by the Andrew Gillum historic upset, but that race is extraordinary.
Yeah.
You had a guy, Andrew Putnam is a very formidable candidate. Adam Putnam, very formidable candidate, and yet basically as soon as the Fox News debate, and then especially when Donald Trump really endorsed DeSantis, the race flipped about 30 points.
And never changed again.
And then it was over. Yeah.
Completely decisive win for him. It just... he was, when that tweet happened, I think it was June 22nd, where he gave that full endorsement. He never looked back from that. But I think he's got a base there that's different than other Trump-backed candidates. The Navy background, the Yale and Harvard graduations, beautiful family, beautiful wife. I think he brings a lot of assets going into the general election.
It's going to be an interesting few months, that's for sure. Still ahead, it only took about 12 hours for race to become an issue in that race. Controversial comments from a candidate, racist robocalls, and an unwitting Facebook administrator. That's all when we come back. Stay tuned.
Let's build off the success we've had on Governor Scott. The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist.
That comment started the governor's race with a bang. Many people reacting to those words, calling them a racist dog whistle. Others said DeSantis meant nothing by it. His campaign calling it absurd to take it as anything but opposition to Gillum's policies. Governor Scott on Thursday called the comments inartful and that DeSantis could have said it better. Where do you guys come down on this? Was this a signal to his base or making a big deal out of nothing?
You know, Ron DeSantis is an extraordinarily bright guy. Yale, Harvard Law, very sophisticated candidate. You don't say monkey this up, which is not a term that people really use anyway. You don't say it in the context of the first African-American nominee for Democrat entirely by accident. I just don't buy it.
His campaign needs to take him away this weekend, Labor Day weekend. There's a reason why God invented Labor Day weekend for after an election. They need to lock him in a room and give him 20 or 30 minutes of words that he's never allowed to say on the campaign trail. Monkey business would be about the top of that right now. It also shows he hasn't done many confrontational interviews with the media. It's been all Fox News, all Fox News. When he gets on CNN, the AP, etc., he's going to run into some questions that he hasn't had to answer yet.
That's a very good point.
Now, the other thing I would say is if the left jumps on this, the monkey stuff excessively, you know, that's probably a good thing for him. If you follow the Steve Bannon playbook for Donald Trump, the more you racialize the election, I don't know that this is right, but that's the view. The more you racialize the election, the better off for Republicans.
That's interesting. Wow. All right. And also a story this week about DeSantis being an administrator of a Facebook group that regularly posted racist things. DeSantis said he was not aware of it, and he quit the group immediately. Incredible and very telling that Facebook even allows that. Like, how does it allow you to be added to a group without your knowledge? That's something Facebook needs to fix. The Tallahassee Democrat also reported racist robocalls being sent to voters. I wouldn't play that even if we had the audio, but I haven't heard that racist robocall. I don't know if either of you had, but it's clear race has become an issue right away in the campaign, and I don't know, is that really good for anyone? You mentioned that it maybe is good for Republicans.
It depends on how people react. If it's something that's sort of on the line, monkey it up, articulate, that a lot of Americans will say, a lot of Floridians will say, well, everybody makes mistakes. And you know, let's not be too hyper. You know, that can play against the Democrats.
Right.
Racist robocalls is a whole nother ball of wax.
Right.
I mean,
it's great for political commentators because it's got the entire national political media now focused on this race. If I was a supporter of Andrew Gillum, I would have paid to have that robocall sent out so that you could get the support that he is getting. If you look now, the Trump tweet that went out the day after the election attacking Gillum, and then these attacks on him since then, there's no question that the Democratic Party is now unified around Gillum, which, you know, when you're in a five-way race going into it, there could have been, people didn't have to show up at that rally in Orlando on Friday to bring the party together. It's clear now Gillum has everybody behind him.
And that's the reason why I bring up whether you've heard the calls or not, because just to verify the veracity of the story, I would want to hear that call, just, you know, because who knows, maybe that is a Democratic operative making up that robocall.
I wondered that too, but it was traced back to a white supremacist, a known person that does that sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I know they said that at the end of the call, but again, you know, do we really know that's where it came from?
We're only in the first week.
I know, it's week one. It's not even a first full week. All right, by law, both DeSantis and Gilliam have until Thursday to name a running mate for lieutenant governor. Politico reported a list of 9 candidates DeSantis is considering. Top 3 are apparently Bob Cortez of Altamonte Springs, State Senator Debbie Mayfield of Vero Beach, and Judge Laurel Lee. Pam Bondi also being floated. That would put a woman on the ticket and appeal to the Tampa Bay area. As for Gilliam, rumored running mates include Palm Beach County Mayor Melissa McKinley, State Senator Lauren Book of Broward County, State Representative Kristen Jacobs of Broward County, and former Fort Lauderdale Mayor Jack Seiler. Who is each one of them going to pick?
First of all, let's acknowledge it doesn't matter.
Really?
Unless one of these people has got a dead boy in the closet or something.
Right.
The lieutenant governor just does. Nobody votes for the lieutenant governor. Right. And second of all, I have no idea. Yeah. I do think that Ron DeSantis might do himself some good if he picks a Hispanic running mate, just because he's been so hardline on illegal immigration and some of his rhetoric turns off a potentially very, very important block of votes.
Interesting.
To that point, I think that Ginetta Nunez, who's a state representative from South Florida, is at the very top of the running mate list. In fact, I think the other names are getting floated just to basically kind of hide.
But apparently, she said that she wasn't going to take it, or that she was that I think I read that in the Naples Daily News, that she was not interested or had some problems with being nominated.
I think Jeanette's right there.
Really?
Or Debbie Mayfield, I think, is the other two that they're looking for. On the left side, I think that there is a little, there's some pressure on Gilliam to pick a woman. There's a lot of women that woke up on Wednesday, and it was the second cycle in a row where the glass ceiling had not been broken. I don't think he's going to get to Gwen Graham. I don't know if she wants to do it, but somebody like Lauren Book, somebody like Kristen Jacobs, like Melissa McKinley, those are 3 solid choices.
And to your point, Peter, maybe Ginette was just, you know, doing the deflection that
there's a lot of dancing around right now.
Possible candidates normally do. Does it make sense for him to pick Graham and sort of appeal to more moderate voters?
I think it would. Now, if you go back, Gilliam was particularly aggressively attacking Graham early on.
About not being progressive enough.
So there's definitely some ill will there, at least on the campaign teams. But I think she would be a great pick for him if she was willing to do it.
Right.
They've got only a couple days, too. I mean, they've got to get, I think it was such a surprise. They got to do the vetting now. Obviously, Graham is vetted, but some of those other people that we mentioned, there's a lot of lawyers right now that are looking through a lot of opposition research on people that whose names are only being floated this weekend.
Interesting. Well, many are calling this year's midterm elections the year of the woman. When we come back, a look at whether the data support that here in Florida, and one of the oldest arguments in politics, open versus closed primaries, and how it affects the hyper-partisan environment we're currently in. Many people are calling this the year of the woman in politics. If we look at Florida, 2 of 4 statewide races include a woman candidate, attorney general and agriculture commissioner, but not governor or U.S. Senate. Here in Tampa Bay, 4 of the 8 congressional races representing our area include a female. 18 of 27 state house races and 7 of 8 state Senate races. Adam, in your winners and losers column this week, you called this a loser because of some of the poor performance in those 2 statewide races. What's What say you about this?
Well, you do have a lot of women still running for the legislature. We'll see how they fare. But you had two very crowded races. You had with only men and one woman, agriculture commissioner and
the governor's race.
And governor's race, yeah. And neither of the women won. So if you're somebody that's not paying close attention, you got 3 or 4 men's names and 1 woman's name. I would have thought that the woman had an advantage. It didn't appear to be the case.
Yeah, and obviously the 2 biggest races that are going to be happening in November, Senate, governor, no woman.
Florida likes to buck national trends. We're going to have the biggest gender gap election ever at the national level. I don't know if that will translate all the way down to Florida because there isn't somebody at the top of the ticket.
When you say gender gap, what do you mean by that?
That women will be voting one way and that men will be voting another way.
Oh, okay,
and so
gotcha.
they were expecting this to be the biggest gender gap election ever. I thought if Florida played into it, we were going to see that even more so. That would have been probably Gwen Graham's calling card in November. Now we're not going to see that necessarily play out. But there are good candidates. Ashley Moody is a strong candidate. That's an incredible race to watch. 2 very good candidates, Sean Shaw on the Democratic side. And I do think it's very interesting. Nikki Fried running for agriculture commissioner. She's a former lobbyist. She's a political neophyte, but she's got a very good shot at knocking off Matt Caldwell. And if all the races were to go Republican as they have in midterm elections, but she were to win, somebody who literally just got into the race in June would be the highest ranking Democrat in the state and maybe the titular head of the party.
Interesting. And we're still seeing a lot, most of those female candidates are on the Democratic side. We could use more female candidates, I think, on the Republican side.
Yeah.
Last week, Tampa Mayor Bob Buckhorn and I sat down for a chat. We talked about how bad partisan politics have gotten and ways to help fix it. And one of those topics, open versus closed primaries.
If you think about it, most Americans, most Floridians are in the center. They're a little center left, a little center right. They're not at the extremes. The partisanship and the primary process lends itself to the loudest voices and the most extreme voices. That's not where most Floridians are, and they're certainly not where most Americans are. So an open primary that's not closed to only those hardcore partisans that vote in a primary absolutely is better for the country, better for the state. It doesn't give us the best candidates, and it doesn't give us a healthy competition of ideas and a debate about a path forward. That's where you find that common ground.
So, guys, one school of thought says we all have to be governed by the eventual winner of the race, so we all deserve a say. Another school says, hey, it's my party, and I'll vote for who I want to.
You know, I think he's right. We have this screwy system in Florida where the candidates for either party spend 18 months campaigning for the nomination. So usually that means campaigning for the most hardcore activists on the left and the right, and then they pick a nominee, and it's 2 months to appeal to the overall electorate.
That's kind of backwards.
Now the party people will say appropriately, this is our primary. We should be able to pick who we want without people infringing on getting involved in our primary. But taxpayers are paying for that, and we're approaching 1/3 of the electorate as independent voters. Why should they subsidize these primary elections? If they want to keep it strictly partisan, strictly Republican or Democrat, then they should pay for it, as some other states do.
Interesting.
The one big mistake I think we made was getting rid of the runoff. I think that was maybe 14 years ago, but you would see candidates like Bob Graham emerge from runoffs. You'd have a competitive race in September, a very quick race again, but we lost some of the great Lawton Childs, Ruben Askew, Bob Graham. Those people, they won runoffs even though they finished second. It would have been nice to see a runoff now maybe between Gwen Graham and Andrew Gillum, or Denise Grimsley and Matt Caldwell in some of these races. I think when you only win with 33, 34%, it's very hard to claim a mandate for anything going into the general election.
Yeah, that's certainly true. But, you know, you also, when you think about that, if you spend that much time fighting against each other, you are appealing to the voices on one far side or the other, and that sort of leaves all the rest of us. Plus, not to mention, you know, I'm a no-party affiliated voter because I don't have an affiliation to either party. I'm left out of the process of the primary. All right, folks, we will be right back with some misleading campaign ads and how they're now using news stories in them. We don't have the time to show you the ads, but that misleading ad by Frank White's campaign where he sort of manipulated a news story from our partners at WESH in Orlando, all the negative ads, the ones who ran the most negative, didn't win.
A lot, and the people that ran the most misleading ads, Frank White, Adam Putnam, they both lost.
We had him up by 10 points, and he ended up losing. It's a case of karma coming back to kick him in the butt.
Wow, there you go. Well, thank you very much for joining us this morning, folks. Meet the Press is next. Chuck Todd will be interviewing Andrew Gillum, the Democratic nominee for Florida governor. He's also got Republican Senator Dan Sullivan of Alaska and Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. Wade and Sam making a little cameo appearance Labor Day weekend. It's all about family, folks. Have a great day.